So why does MUFON, Washington, receive so many cases from Snohomish County? There's a Dr. Dave who is a field investigator here in Snohomish County, and he brought this to my attention, and that is the naval radio station Jim Creek. It's a communication with the naval aircraft and submarines. And what made this site famous was in 2019 on Russian state television, Dmitry Kislov identified several American sites that he would claim to be mission targets in case we ever went to war against Russia or vice versa. So those three sites that he mentioned would have been the Pentagon, of course, Camp David, and Naval Radio Station Jim Creek in Arlington. Worried, but these things have been around forever. This is the site. It's really hard to tell the size of this antenna array, but the sketch will show you. And why am I so fascinated with antenna? That's basically what I did. This is the copy of the clear cut. So that's on the east side of I-5 up by Arlington. On the west side, there's a naval security group in Marietta, and this site was closed in the 70s. This is a radio direction site that the Navy had prior to Jim Creek. I was a radio direction finder. I worked at a site similar to this. We call the array, the antenna array, a elephant cage. So I want to talk about alien bases here on Earth. We are doing the presentation here, and also on June the 1st, we're going to do the same presentation in Puyallup. So today's topics, I want to talk about military remote viewing, not just being a general remote viewer, but more or less the remote viewers out of the 60s and 70s, remote viewing alien bases here on Earth, encounters with aliens at some of these sites, and I'll say this twice, how close these sites are to NSA or military intelligence bases. All of these sites that were remote viewed are very close to NSA stations. The Washington State chapter person that actually introduced me to MUFON, her opinion was that the holy grail of ufology is remote viewing. So a typical remote viewing session consists of a person who is referred to as a sender. And that person will travel to a remote location by the remote viewer. Another person is involved. So there's three different people. There's the sender, there's the remote viewer, and then there's an evaluator. So the evaluator would ask that the remote viewer describe the location of where the sender is placed. The description would include drawings, verbalization, and written words. If the evaluator found that there were hits on this and the hits kept coming, that would be a psychic phenomenon, and he would be a highly rated remote viewer. So this image is of an ASA site in Berlin. I was stationed there. Sources for my presentation are coming from declassified releases, which when I started going online and looking up some different code names and things like this, it's unbelievable what has been declassified. And that's basically how I came up with this presentation. I am not a remote viewer, never was a remote viewer. My military service was stationed at this ASA site. I left Berlin in 1970, and in the 70s, the Soviet Union was spending an equivalent of $90 billion a year on remote viewing. Well, they really had to. Our group was a very professional group, and as Dan would say, probably what the Russians were doing, they were more of the woo-woo type, meaning they're really out there. So during the 60s and 70s, there were these companies that came up. One was Mankind Research. So I think that was coming up probably about the same time I was in the service. Its mission was to study the effects of traumatic radiation on the central nervous system, and researching telepathic communications, doing cranial implants. Sounds almost alien, doesn't it? But these are NSA corporations, basically. Researching telepathic communications versus like code. I would listen to signals coming in. They were working on being able to send this telepathically. Experimentations in mind-altering drugs. Its director was Carl Schachner, and he denied that the U.S. government had any connections with this company. In 1973, a book came out called The Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. Schachner, the director of Mankind Research, recruited the book's writers, Oslander and Schroeder. The reason he recruited them is to collect protocols for telepathic communications. So Mankind Research also recruited one of the top remote viewers in the world, Ingo Swann, who was an old guy, born in 33. In the book, Psychic Orders from Behind the Iron Curtain, it talked about in the last chapter of the book, dealt with UFOs landing in Russia, 30 miles south of Moscow. And I would hear more about MiG fights with UFOs than anything like this. But these crafts landed in September of '89. UFO alien cosmonauts walked out of their crafts, walked around a community park. All of this was going on. There were discs hovering over nuclear power plants as well as electrical generating stations. Astrophysicist was sent over by the name of Kelley, was sent over from the United States to investigate these sightings. He at that time was a computer systems designer for the Department of Defense. He was also the person most recognized for designing the UFO classification program that MUFON relies on heavily for classification today. Russia's remote viewers Russia set up remote viewers to target this site. After having Jacques Delay go over, there was a release from the Russian Ministry of Security, along with documents from the CIA, that concluded that they could make this statement. And that statement is, this was an alien reconnaissance mission. And it was published in the New York Times in 1989. So the guy who was director of Mankind Research, William Bruce Davis, X-Files actor, cigarette man, they compare him quite often to him. Schachner graduated from the Naval Academy. All these guys are just really up there. He served as a naval line officer, specializing in operations, research, and linguistics. He stayed in Germany, got a master's in the University of Cologne. He is known as being the mind-controlled mad genius behind MK Ultra, father of cyborg. And when he passed away in 1999, he denied ever being granted that. As I mentioned, Schachner also hired remote viewer Ingo Swann. Swann was born in 33, passed away in 2013. So he had developed the process of remote viewing for Mankind Research. He formulated direct, the brain-to-brain communication by sending codes telepathically versus the electronic transmission of code. Ingo Swann worried about the telepathic mind control of aliens over humans. He was briefed at a NSA site, Sugar Grove, West Virginia, on that particular subject. So this is the book that he wrote, Penetration, Questions of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathic. Book's a hard one to find, but it's talks about Earth-bound alien bases. Like Mankind Research, which was on the East Coast, Fort Meade, Maryland, there was Stanford Research on the West Coast. So SRI hired a remote viewer. So we're going to talk about another one, Pat Price. He was SRI's most successful remote viewer. He, with Ingo Swann, wrote the remote viewing policy standards for the American military. Price was unbelievably accurate, said his CIA handler. This is a pic of Pat Price with his handler. This photograph was taken at an airport when the CIA was testing Price's remote viewing capabilities from a low-level flying aircraft, most likely a Cessna. What struck me the most about this photograph, I think he looks a lot like Bill Murray. So after a not so pleasant death experience, Price passed away in '77. He had just met with agents from the NSA at Sugar Grove outside of DC. The meeting was about remote viewing that he was doing for SRI. He never really revealed the scope of the meeting, but he ended up taking the documents with him to Las Vegas for another NSA meeting. His son also lived in Las Vegas. There in a hotel room in Las Vegas, Price was found no longer breathing. He had stopped breathing not only once, but 4 times, according to the paramedics and security. So this is a decommissioned site, Sugar Grove. Like all NSA sites, they're all seem to be. So the real meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about is Price's remote viewing of 4 underground UFO bases. The former CIA director back then was Stansfield Turner. And he said Price is the man who could see what was going on anywhere in the world through his psychic powers. His boss was Hal Puthoff, who was then the CIA's remote viewing program handler at SRI. Price told his boss, Puthoff, "You might be interested in those UFO bases that I remote view." Price believed that ET had established 4 underground earthbound bases. He had remote viewed all 4 of them. Price's remote viewing sessions showed, and his artwork showed, humans working alongside with aliens. Price reported that the primary purpose of these bases is the recruitment of aliens and replacement of new military recruits. Declassified documents about Mount Hayes, which is, I wanted to talk about, these are the different sites that I'm going to talk about. The declassified documents from Mount Hayes, which is number 1 of the 4 mountains. Price was the first to report the existence of an alien base under Mount Hayes. He described seeing structures like tubes, and seems like all the remote viewers describe it the same way: tubes, tunnels, and sophisticated equipment. He reported seeing strange humanoid figures working alongside what he believed were military personnel. Price claimed that the base was also responsible for the malfunction of US and Soviet space projects. And he claimed that any attempt to approach this particular base would be counteracted with electronic warfare against the person. I'm not going to play all of this, and I don't even know if it's not coming through on the sound system. But this is off the History Channel. I'm really going to play it, but it just gives a little credibility to some of the research that I was able to pull off the web. This is an artist rendering of the underground facility at Mount Hayes. Price also reviewed the second mountain, remote viewed Mount Nyanji in Zimbabwe. And what's unique about this particular site, it's 100 miles west of the aerial school. The reason I bring that up, the aerial school is where in 1994, 62 pupils witnessed UFOs land and creatures walk from their craft. At a webinar that MUFON Washington did November the 20th, a prior aerial school pupil and experiencer who was there at that time, was interviewed by the field investigators with MUFON. Our guest speaker spoke about her interview with Dr. Mack. Dr. Mack is a well-known psychiatrist, or was a well-known psychiatrist with Harvard University. And his notoriety comes from interviewing witnesses of alien encounters. In his book, Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens, was a 1994 bestseller. At this particular location, Price remote viewed maintenance and repair underground center, and he basically was able to present artwork of spare equipment and parts being welded. These are sketches from our webinar meeting, and this is the craft landing and the student looking at the craft. This is also the entity that had left the craft. So my favorite is the third site. It's a remote view at Mount Zeal in Australia's Northern Territory. So what else is in Australia's Northern Territory? Well, it's when he was doing this remote viewing, he was actually he knew that he was being detected. So why was he being detected? Because next to that mountain, Mount Zeal, is Pine Gap. And Pine Gap, as you're probably aware, is the most important intelligence facility in the world. Its mission is the collection of intelligence, missile early warnings, targeting nuclear weapons, providing battlefield intelligence. So this site critically supports armed control verification and targeting data for drones. It's only 60 miles away. So most of these, like I said, I think in the beginning, is what's unique about where these site locations are. There's an NSA site close by. Another one of the underground facilities is Mount Perdido, and that's on the French-Spanish border. It's in the Pyrenees at 11,000 feet. This particular mountain is unique because there's been verifiable UFO hangars. This alien perimeter is equipped with advanced detectors and sensors. So the French, they call it the French Espionage Service, operates communication satellites about 180 miles north of this mountain. This alien base was not remote viewed. It's in Russia. We've been talking about Russia. It's Mount Fisk. It's an interplanetary spaceport, and Russian military troops have set up their own clandestine base close by. It's only about 30 miles from Sochi, the Olympics. So with the military's knowledge of these under the mountain alien bases, and in researching about the cooperation of certain alien species, has led us to a program called the Solar Warden Program. The program is managed by included in the program are 8 cigar-shaped motherships, each longer than 2 football fields in length. The mothership has 43 small scout ships that they typically travel with. So according to military protocol and looking at what's going on today, like with manufacturers like General Dynamics, they recently provided a $45 billion autonomous tank force for the US Army. So this program includes just 1 major manned tank, and it's supported by a large number of unmanned autonomous tanks who are equipped with drones. So it sounds like sort of the mothership with its 43 scout ships. Solar Warden has been around since the 80s, suggesting there's a hidden agenda of alien presence here on Earth. So the program originated originally under Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. He sort of hinted at the program and contradicting the known capabilities at that time with NASA. Further proof of the program comes from a British astronomer by the name of Walson, who basically through high-powered telescopes took videos and film of the ships. When a hacker by the name of Beerman hacked into the U.S. Space Command computers, he learned the existence of this program. Well, the Bush administration wanted to extradite him from the UK and bring him to trial. But to do that, his attorneys would have to subpoena the military officers to testify in court at above classified information. The other problem was there was no way that he was going to be extradited from the UK. This is a sighting I had a couple of years back, and two witnesses. The witness that drew the craft on the right, it's a 600 or 2 football field length craft, the same as the Solar Warden mothership. And this sighting took place only about 60 miles from the Yakima firing range, which back in the 60s housed a NSA site. So why was it so close? I don't know. I think it's sort of like what I'm doing. I'm reminiscing. I'm going down memory lane, talking about all this stuff. Sometimes I think these sightings come back and they fly over these areas. But in 2013, the National Security Agency closed this post. And I remember driving Highway 82 and seeing these huge domes and knowing exactly what they are. In a book, though, called The Puzzle Palace, the NSA said that the Yakima Research Station had played a major role for decades in Echelon, which is a global surveillance network operating. Its mission was the intercept of satellite communications, emails, and calls from cell phones. So I don't know what it is about these UFOs, but they cannot stay away from antennas. This is just an underground site that's in northern New Mexico. I'm going to breeze through this a little bit because the real point of this is their Big Bertha, like Seattle had, to drill this site. It's a 7-story complex housing extraterrestrial life. The tunnel engineer alleges that the underground aliens were conducting experiments there on humans and aliens, and humans and their human DNA. The base is believed to have different levels, 7 different levels. And in this diagram, you'll see the different levels, but what I like pointing out the most in the bottom right-hand corner, it says underground tunnel to Los Alamos. So back to these remote viewers. Lynn Buchanan retired from the military in '92. He had been a military computer expert with the Hercules, the Nike Hercules missile system. He became a military linguist specializing in German and Russian. He was assigned to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey. He was actually a teacher there, professor, I guess. The guys that I worked with that came from the Institute, their IQs were off the chart. Lynn Buchanan mentions one more than what Pat Price did, 5 extraterrestrial bases. And he describes them pretty much the same way. He believes, though, that there are some ETs that are more psychic and some that are less psychic. He categorizes 2 alien categories as there's the unfriendly non-psychics who travel here. And he says the psychic friendly ones are here to help humans and help develop our abilities to become a stronger species. He says the unfriendly psychic ones are here to wipe us off the planet. This is a book that Buchanan wrote. It's just about his whole life experience in the military. Another remote viewer is John Von Eagle. He was born in '46. He must be my age. He's a retired Army Chief Warrant Officer. He too is associated with remote viewing Mount Hayes. He said, I've never seen anything like this before. It's like walking into a place I have no familiarity with. The whole thing is underground, and it looks like it's an atomic power plant. So he also goes on to say, I don't get a real aggressive nature from this target. He's calling these sites targets. He went on to draw some radio type intercept things. And what he ended up drawing ended up being a high frequency active aurora research antenna array that's only 100 miles north of 100 miles south of Mount Hayes. No, I was right. Mount Hayes is 100 miles north of this. Our program is a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere. Mankind Research, we talked about all these different corporations, Mankind Research, Stanford Research, MK Ultra, alien communications with humans, mind control. I guess the question I want to ask this afternoon is, did we learn from the aliens, or did our military government agencies and private companies like Mankind Research teach the aliens, or maybe some class of aliens? Maybe we humans are the role leaders and not the aliens. Is this the type of exchange that Lynn Buchanan mentioned when describing non-psychic friendly aliens? Is this the so-called trade agreement that aliens are here helping us and we are assisting aliens here on Earth? I'll leave that for you to think about this afternoon. Thank you.